Welcome to Simplified UPSC by PPP, where we listen, learn, and grow together. Detailed lecture notes in English and Hindi, plus practice questions for prelims and mains, only on our Telegram channel. Link in description. Like and subscribe for more.
Welcome, friends, to a deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the nuts and bolts, the institutional muscle behind environmental protection.
That's right.
We're not focusing on, the specific ecosystems or the latest climate science today. Instead, we're looking at the organizations, the laws, the whole governmental structure, basically, that actually carries out conservation strategies.
Exactly. And our mission today, well, it's all about precision.
All right.
We're going to dissect the statutory foundations, the mandates, what these bodies are actually supposed to do, and their operational roles.
Okay.
Both the key national ones here in India and some major international players, too. And crucially, we're sticking strictly to the source material provided.
Right.
The goal here is to build a really solid understanding of this governance architecture, how environmental policy actually gets funded, how it's enforced, and importantly, how it's ethically implemented.
Absolutely. Because understanding who has the power and under which specific act they get that power, well, that's just fundamental, isn't it?
It really is.
It helps you grasp why some policies maybe work out and others don't. So we're charting that whole landscape: regulatory power, advisory functions, international cooperation. It all forms the bedrock. We've got a lot to cover. Okay, let's dive in and unpack that first level of regulatory power. Where do we start?
Right. Let's begin with the foundational structures in India. If you think about the nation's biological resources, not just animals, but plants, microorganisms, genetic material, everything, if you think of them as, well, sovereign assets, both intellectual and physical.
Okay, like national assets.
Exactly. Then you need an institution to control access to them and, importantly, to make sure things are fair. That brings us to the National Biodiversity Authority, or the NBA.
The NBWL.
It's a crucial statutory body, and it was established under a very specific piece of legislation, the Biological Diversity Act, 2002.
The NBA is really interesting, I think, because its job isn't just about conservation in the traditional sense. It seems deeply rooted in, well, global equity issues and even intellectual property rights.
That's a perfect way to put it.
It feels like it shifts the focus a bit, away from just saving species, towards managing the knowledge that comes from those resources.
That is the essential insight, yes. The core mandate of the NBA, drawn directly from that 2002 Act, it's really twofold. First, it has to regulate access to biological resources, who gets to use them, under what conditions. And second, and this is absolutely critical, it has to ensure the fair and equitable sharing of benefits that come from using those resources.
Benefits sharing, that sounds key.
It is. And often, this benefit sharing is meant to go back to the local communities, the ones who often hold the traditional knowledge about how to use a particular plant or resource.
Right. So let's say I'm a big pharmaceutical company, or maybe a research institute from overseas, and I want to develop a new drug based on, I don't know, some traditional knowledge about a plant found only in a specific part of India.
Yes.
Then the NBA is the gatekeeper I have to go through.
Precisely. The legal power, the teeth of the NBA here, is actually immense. Critically, anybody seeking intellectual property rights, like a patent, on research that uses biological resources or traditional knowledge obtained from India, they must get prior approval from the NBA. It's not optional.
Wow, okay. Prior approval.
And that approval isn't just a rubber stamp. It comes with strings attached. The NBA has the full power to impose specific conditions about sharing the financial benefits, maybe other outcomes too, that come from that intellectual property.
So it's not just about permission, it's about setting the terms.
Exactly. It makes the NBA a really powerful regulator, not just in the environmental space, but in the intellectual and economic spheres related to those environmental assets.
Okay, that sets a really high bar.
Yeah.
It's about sustainable use, yes, but also ethical resource management. But now, if we shift gears away from managing intellectual assets and fair deals and towards dealing with actual physical crime, like poaching and smuggling, then we're looking at a very different kind of body, right? Something much more operational. That would be the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, the WCCB.
That's it, the WCCB. It functions as a statutory, multidisciplinary body.
Statutory, okay, so created by law, but multidisciplinary. What does that mean in practice?
That term is absolutely vital here because Unlike maybe a standard government department that has one focus, the WCCB is specifically designed to bring together expertise from lots of different fields.
Like who?
Think customs officers, police, forest department officials, even intelligence agencies. The idea is to create a unified front against organized wildlife crime.
And why is that kind of integration so necessary?
Well, think about it. Organized wildlife crime, the poaching of rhinos for their horns, the smuggling of pangolin scales, the illegal trade in exotic pets. This stuff doesn't respect state borders.
No, of course not.
And it doesn't fit neatly into one department's box either. So the WCCB's role is specifically focused on combating organized wildlife crime that operates across the country and often internationally, too.
So its job is enforcement?
Primarily, yes. Its function is to strengthen the enforcement of the law, specifically laws aimed at controlling poaching and illegal trade in wildlife and wildlife products, and it operates across the entire country.
Okay, so the WCCB is really the sharp end of the stick when it comes to law enforcement against this kind of crime.
You could say that.
They're the operational arm fighting the illegal trade, basically reinforcing the framework that's already there in the main law, the Wildlife Protection Act, 1972. That's the big one for conservation in India, right?
Exactly. The WPA 1972 is the parent legislation for so much of India's conservation effort. And the WCCB strengthens the enforcement aspect of it.
Does it do anything else besides direct enforcement?
Yes, it does. Beyond just enforcement, the WCCB also has a crucial advisory role. It recommends necessary changes in policies and laws to the government of India.
Oh, okay.
Particularly regarding wildlife crimes that have national and international ramifications. They also work on developing the infrastructure, the tools, the techniques, and the capacity for proper scientific and professional investigation of these often very complex crimes.
Got it. So enforcement, advice on policy, and building capacity for investigation. Makes sense. Now let's look at two more really key institutions. They actually come from the same foundational act, the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972.
Right.
But they have totally different jobs.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the National Board for Wildlife and the Central Zoo Authority. Maybe start with the one that sits right at the top of policymaking, the National Board for Wildlife, the NBWL.
Yes, the NBWL, another essential statutory body also under the Wildlife Protection Act, 1972. Now, what's really fascinating here and tells you a lot about its importance is its composition. Specifically, who chairs it?
Who is that?
It's chaired by the Prime Minister of India.
The Prime Minister, wow.
Yes. That single fact really underscores the kind of national priority that's assigned to wildlife conservation right at the very highest level of the executive branch.
Okay, having the PM as the chairperson, that immediately signaled that any advice coming from this board, well, it carries immense political weight.
Absolutely.
So what is its core function then? Is it just advisory?
Its primary role is advisory, yes. It advises the central government on policies and measures for conserving wildlife. It also advises on establishing and managing protected areas, national parks, sanctuaries, and so on.
But does it have any real power beyond advice?
Oh, yes. It wields massive regulatory power, too. Here's the key part. Any change to the boundaries of a protected area or any approval for projects, think big infrastructure projects, mining, dams within, or even right next to protected areas. That requires the NBWL's clearance, their sign-off. Without it, major development projects near these ecologically sensitive zones simply cannot legally proceed.
Wow. So it acts as a really critical check and balance, especially against potentially harmful infrastructure development in sensitive areas.
A very powerful check, yes.
Okay. Now let's switch to the other body. Under the 1972 Act, you mentioned the Central Zoo Authority, or CZA. Its job sounds very specific, focused on zoos, right? Captive animals?
That's right. The CZA is responsible for recognizing zoos, setting the standards they have to meet, and generally managing zoos across India. Again, it functions under the same 1972 Wildlife Protection Act.
What kind of functions does that involve specifically?
Well, its functions include things like coordinating training for zoo staff, promoting research, especially in captive breeding programs for endangered species, and setting very specific priorities for which animals should be displayed, ensuring the facilities meet, stringent international standards for animal welfare. They also mandate that zoos maintain stud books for endangered species bred in captivity to manage genetics.
Right, the stud books. That makes sense for breeding programs. But the CZA is probably best known, at least based on our source material here, for something really quite groundbreaking, an ethical and legal intervention involving dolphins.
Ah, yes. This is where you see the power of an expert regulatory body moving beyond just setting minimum standards and actually setting profound ethical precedents. The CZA, through an official circular, categorized cetacean species, dolphins, porpoises as non-human persons.
Non-human persons. That phrase alone is massive. It completely reframes the legal standing of a whole group of species.
Yeah.
What was the thinking behind that? Why designate them as non-human persons?
The reasoning given in that circular was based on scientific understanding. It highlighted the fact that dolphins are highly intelligent, they appear to be self-aware, and they are extremely sensitive creatures.
Okay.
Based on that, the CZA ruled that it was, and I quote, morally unacceptable to keep them captive for entertainment purposes.
Morally unacceptable. That's strong language from a regulatory body. What were the practical effects? The immediate policy consequences of this ethical ruling.
It was quite direct. The CZA order instructed all state governments to immediately reject any proposals for establishing dolphinariums. Didn't matter if they were proposed by private companies or even government agencies, reject them all.
No new dolphin shows, basically.
Exactly. And furthermore, it prohibited the import or capture of any cetacean species specifically for commercial entertainment or public exhibition.
Wow.
This decision powerfully reinforced the protection already given to specific species like the Gangetic dolphin, which is of course also India's national aquatic animal, and the snubfin dolphin, both listed under the Indian Wildlife Protection Act, 1972.
That CZA ruling is a fascinating example, isn't it? It shows the immense transformative power that an institutional mandate can have when it's used to elevate ethical standards based on scientific understanding. Really powerful.
It really is.
Okay, now just to round out this section on key statutory bodies, we should probably touch on the Animal Welfare Board of India, the AWBI.
Yes, the AWBI. It's also a statutory advisory body, but crucially, it operates under a different and actually older law, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, 1960.
Okay, so 1960, not 1972. And prevention of cruelty, not wildlife protection. That's an important distinction.
It is, because while the Wildlife Protection Act mainly deals with wild animals and conservation in their natural habitats, the AWBI's focus is broader. It covers animal welfare across the board, including domestic animals, animals used in experiments, farmed animals.
Got it. And you said it's advisory, so how does it exert influence if it's mainly advising?
Its key function is advising the government on making and enforcing laws and rules related to animal welfare, trying to make sure measures are in place to minimize animal suffering.
Like what kind of measures?
Well, this could include promoting the construction of things like animal shelters or water troughs for working animals, providing veterinary assistance, even advising on the humane design and maintenance of slaughterhouses, specifically to eliminate unnecessary pain or suffering during that process. So it acts kind of like the government's conscience on animal welfare issues, making sure the spirit of that 1960 Act preventing unnecessary cruelty is upheld.
Okay, that covers the core statutory bodies focused on wildlife, biodiversity, and animal welfare. Let's pivot now. Moving on from those, let's look at one of the biggest environmental challenges the country faces, managing our water resources. Specifically, the massive effort around the Ganga River. We should start with the National Ganga River Basin Authority, or NGRBA.
Right, the NGRBA. It was constituted back in February 2009. And the legislation it was formed under is really important, the Environment Protection Act, 1986.
The EPA, 1986, that's often called the Umbrella Act, isn't it? Because it gives the central government really broad powers to tackle environmental pollution across the country.
Exactly. So establishing the NGRBA under the EPA gave it significant centralized authority. It was a big deal.
And it represented a real shift in thinking, didn't it? Moving away from just, cleaning up small stretches here and there towards a more holistic approach, treating the entire river basin, the Ganga, and all its tributaries as one single planning unit.
Absolutely. That was the core idea. Holistic, basin-wide management under a unified national authority.
So what were its immediate, detailed objectives when it was set up? What was it trying to achieve right away?
Well, the two main objectives were pretty clear. Pollution abatement, reducing pollution, and consequently, improving the water quality of the Ganga.
And how was it supposed to do that? What was the strategy?
The strategy was quite precise. It focused on intercepting, diverting, and treating two main sources of pollution. First, domestic sewage from towns and cities along the river. Second, toxic and industrial chemical wastes coming from identified grossly polluting units, factories, and industries located on the riverbanks.
So targeting the big point sources of pollution, the sewage pipes and the industrial drains?
That was the immediate focus, yes. It had the regulatory teeth to go after those major polluters, and also the strategic role of planning the cleanup.
Did it have broader goals, too,
Yeah.
beyond just treating waste?
It did. Its broader objectives included financing, planning, and coordinating all the various efforts needed for Ganga rejuvenation. It was meant to be the central hub.
Okay. Now, it's worth mentioning for our listeners that the NGRBA itself isn't the main body anymore, right? The governance structure had evolved.
That's correct. While the NGRBA was pivotal in establishing this basin-wide approach, it has since been replaced by the National Council for Rejuvenation, Protection, and Management of River Ganga, often referred to as the National Ganga Council. But the objectives laid down by the NGRBA really set the foundation for the current governance approach under initiatives like Namami Gange.
Right. And the NGRBA itself, when it was formed in 2009, it wasn't starting completely from scratch either. It built on much earlier efforts, didn't it? Like the original Ganga Action Plan.
That's absolutely right. The NGRBA provided a much stronger, more centralized institutional framework. But the actual process of trying to clean the Ganga began decades earlier. The Ganga Action Plan, GAP, the first major attempt, was launched way back on January 14, 1986.
1986, wow.
And it had the same core objective, pollution abatement. So the experience gained and, frankly, the lessons learned, both successes and failures from the GAP, definitely informed the creation of the more powerful, basin-focused NGRBA later on.
Makes sense. And looking at the more contemporary strategies under the current rejuvenation plan, there have been some interesting financing ideas introduced, things designed to get more public involvement, more funding, specifically this Clean Ganga Fund.
Yes, the Clean Ganga Fund, or CGF. It was set up specifically to encourage voluntary financial contributions towards cleaning the Ganga.
Voluntary contributions from whom?
Well, it wasn't just limited to people living in India. Contributions were actively sought from NRIs, non-resident Indians and PIOs, persons of Indian origin living abroad, and even other international contributors. So it was designed as a kind of globally sourced funding mechanism, tapping into the diaspora and international goodwill.
Interesting. And what kind of specific projects does this fund actually pay for? This is important, right?
Right.
Where does the money actually go to build public trust?
Exactly. The CGF is designed to finance specific, measurable projects. Often, it supplements the main government funding under programs like Namami Gange. The money goes towards things like supporting research and development for better cleaning technologies,
Okay.
funding innovative pilot projects for pollution control, and crucially, it also helps tackle non-point pollution.
Non-point pollution. That's the tricky stuff, right? Not coming from a single pipe.
Precisely. It's diffuse pollution, things like agricultural runoff, pesticides and fertilizers washing off fields, or waste from open defecation near the riverbanks. It's much harder to control than factory outlets.
So the fund helps with that, too. What else?
The fund also supports setting up essential infrastructure like sewage treatment plants and waste treatment facilities. And importantly, it's also used for the conservation of the river's biotic diversity, protecting the fish, the dolphins, the turtles, the riverine ecosystems. So it links the cleanup effort directly to restoring the ecological health of the Ganga.
Okay, we build a pretty solid picture of the national institutional backbone for environmental governance in India. Now let's zoom out. Let's broaden our view and look at some of the major international organizations that play a huge role in shaping global environmental policy. Where should we start? Maybe with the IUCN.
Yes, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUCN. It's arguably the most recognized and authoritative global body when it comes to assessing the status of the natural world. Its most famous output by far is the Red Data Books, or more accurately now, the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species.
The Red List, right. That's the fundamental index, isn't it, for understanding extinction risk around the globe.
Absolutely.
These books, or the list now, contain the definitive lists of threatened species. This is where we get those common classifications everyone hears about, like endangered or vulnerable. But how does the IUCN actually decide? What specific criteria do they use to categorize these threats? It's not just a gut feeling, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. The methodology behind the Red List is incredibly rigorous and based purely on scientific data and analysis. For instance, to classify a species as endangered, EN,
Yeah.
the criteria indicate it's facing a very high risk of extinction in the wild. This isn't vague. It includes specific, measurable scenarios. Like, for example, if the species has experienced a population reduction of 70% or more over the last 10 years or 3 generations, whichever is longer.
70% reduction. Okay, that's drastic.
Or another criterion could be if the total estimated population size number is fewer than 250 mature individuals. These are precise quantitative metrics used for the assessment.
Got it. And what about the next level down? Vulnerable.
Right. Just below endanger and critically endangered, which is even higher risk, is the vulnerable VU category. A species gets classified as vulnerable when the evidence indicates it meets criteria showing a high risk of extinction in the wild. It's still serious, just not quite meeting the threshold for endangered yet.
Okay.
This whole classification system, critically endangered, endangered, vulnerable, near threatened, least concern, etc., it provides the critical data foundation. National governments, conservation NGOs, researchers worldwide use this list to understand the threats and, importantly, to guide where conservation efforts and resources absolutely must be prioritized.
It basically provides the common scientific language for global conservation priorities.
Makes sense. Okay, let's move now to another huge player, the United Nations Environment Program, or UNP. Within the big UN system, UNP has a unique role, right? It's the main environmental coordinator. That's correct. UNEP is positioned as the leading global environmental authority within the UN system. Its job, essentially, is to coordinate environmental action across the UN, to help set the global environmental agenda, and, crucially, to promote the consistent implementation of the environmental dimension of sustainable development.
So it's the UN's environmental voice and coordinator. What are some examples, based on our source material, of major global initiatives that UNEP is directly linked to? Something that shows its scope, maybe from grassroots awareness up to actual financial programs.
Well, 2 quite different examples stand out in the material. First, UNEP is mentioned alongside UNESCO as being involved in the Earth Hour movement.
Earth Hour. Turning the lights off.
Exactly. It's described as a widespread symbolic movement. The main goal is raising awareness about climate change and the urgent need to save the planet. You know, participants switching off non-essential lights for 1 hour every year, a very visible public campaign.
Okay, so that's the awareness side. What about something more direct, like financing?
On the financing and development side, the material notes that UNEP launched the Indian Solar Loan Program. This was back in April 2003.
A solar loan program in India, launched by UNEP. That demonstrates a much more direct impact, doesn't it? Helping actually adopt clean energy technology in the developing economy.
It certainly does. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, you know, international commitments on climate change and emissions, UNEP also plays a critical role in monitoring global progress towards those goals. Specifically, the source mentions that UNEP recognized India in its Authoritative Emission Gap Report 2014.
Recognized India for what?
For being successfully on course at that time, to achieve its voluntary goal of reducing the emissions intensity of its GDP. So this confirms UNEP's role isn't just setting the agenda or running programs, but also in verifying national progress and highlighting success stories on the global stage.
Okay, UNEP sounds pretty central. Now, finally, just to be complete on the international front, we should probably briefly mention another key global player that comes up, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, or WWF.
Yes, WWF. It's noted in the material as a leading major non-governmental conservation organization. Its mission is described broadly as focusing on conservation work globally.
So it's an NGO, not part of the UN system like UNEP.
Correct. Its mission spans a wide range from protecting specific endangered species and their habitats to reducing humanity's overall environmental footprint and generally working towards a future where people and nature can thrive together. They often act as a significant partner on the ground for many governmental and intergovernmental conservation efforts worldwide.
Okay, perfect. We've laid out the whole architectural blueprint now, I think. From India's core regulatory institutions like the NBA and NBWL to the specific action bodies like WCCB and CZA, the River Basin Authority, and then the big international players like IUCN and UNEP. Yeah. Now let's try to use this framework to really sharpen our understanding of the functional differences between, say, 2 of India's most powerful environmental bodies. This feels like a really critical point of institutional distinction for learners to grasp. So what is the key functional difference in the mandate, in what they're fundamentally set up to do between the work governed by the Biological Diversity Act, 2002, which created the NBA, and the broader protection and enforcement efforts focused on specific plants and animals, like the work done by the WCCB or the NBWL, operating under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972.
This is, I think, perhaps the most important conceptual leap we need listeners to make, because although the subject matter biological life obviously overlaps completely,
Right.
they govern fundamentally different types of value associated with that life. The distinction really boils down to managing resources for equity versus protecting species and habitats through prohibition and regulation.
Okay, let's break that down. Focus first on the NBA under the BDA 2002. You said it's about access and equity.
Exactly. The NBA's primary focus, mandated directly by the Biological Diversity Act, is specifically regulating access to all biological resources. And I want to emphasize all biological resources. This is much broader than just the wildlife species listed in the schedules of the WPA.
Broader how? Like plants, microbes.
Plants, microbes, insects, genetic sequences, traditional knowledge associated with them, everything. And its central purpose isn't just conservation in isolation. It's ensuring that the economic and intellectual benefits that come from using those resources are shared fairly and equitably.
The benefit sharing again?
Yes. The NBA essentially manages the biological resource as a potential asset, as part of a transaction. Its priority is ensuring that any use is sustainable, yes, but also that there's economic justice, particularly for the local communities who are often the custodians of these resources or the related knowledge.
Okay, so if, let's say, a rare medicinal plant from a tribal area is studied by a company, the NBA's job is to make sure that the tribal community potentially gets a fair share of any eventual profit or benefit that comes from that plant.
That's the core idea, yes. It manages the biological asset for national and community benefit. Now, contrast that with the efforts governed by the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 and the bodies operating under it, like the WCCB and the NBWL.
Okay, how are they different?
Their core mandate is primarily about protection, prohibition, and enforcement.
So purely conservation and stopping illegal activities.
Pretty much, yes. They focus primarily on the protection of specified wild animals, plants, and their habitats, particularly those listed in the schedules of the Act, like Schedule I species, which get the highest protection. And on the enforcement side, stopping poaching and illegal trade.
Right.
They protect wildlife and habitats based on their inherent ecological value and regulate activities within designated protected areas. They aren't generally involved in managing the financial transactions around access and benefit sharing in the same way the NBA is.
So it's like one system, NBA, BDA, manages sustainable and equitable resource usage and the financial side that comes with it.
Right.
While the other system, NBWL, WCCB, WPA, strictly enforces prohibitions against the destruction and illegal movement of specific protected species and manages activities in protected zones.
That's a very clear way to summarize the fundamental difference in their mandates. One is about fair use and benefit sharing of all bioresources. The other is about strict protection and anti-crime enforcement for specified wildlife and habitats.
Got it. That conceptual clarity is really invaluable, I think. The NBA is about how we use the resource fairly. The WCCB and NBWL are more about preventing criminal destruction or regulating activities impacting specified species and areas.
Okay. We have covered a lot of ground: the structure, the acts, the international context, the key differences in mandates. Now, let's try to distill this. Let's synthesize it into some memorable takeaways, the kind of pointers that will really stick. Maybe start with the core factual links, which body belongs to which act.
Good idea. These are the absolute must-knows, the critical factual anchors connecting the institution to its legal foundation. Your prelims pointers, if you will.
Exactly. So first, the National Biodiversity Authority, NBA. Remember, that's a statutory body established under the Biological Diversity Act, 2002.
Got it. NBA BDA 2002. Okay, next.
The National Ganga River Basin Authority, NGRBA, although now replaced by its successor council, was originally constituted using the broad powers of the Environment Protection Act, 1986.
Right. NGRBA and EPA 1986. What about the crime fighters?
The Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, WCCB. That's a statutory, multidisciplinary body specifically focused on combating organized wildlife crime, operating under the umbrella of the Wildlife Protection Act, but with its own specific enforcement mandate.
Okay. WCCB organized wildlife crime focus under WPA framework, and the other two major bodies under the main Wildlife Act.
The National Board for Wildlife, NBWL, chaired by the PM, and the Central Zoo Authority, CZA, which regulates zoos, both derive their statutory power directly from that foundational Wildlife Protection Act, 1972.
NBWL and CZA, WPA 1972. Perfect.
And
The animal welfare one.
And the Animal Welfare Board of India, AWBI. Remember, it's distinct. It's a statutory advisory body operating under the separate Older Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, 1960.
AWBI, nice and CA, 1960.
Yeah.
Excellent. And internationally.
Internationally, the key one to link is the IUCN. It's the global authority famous for publishing the Red Data Books or Red List, using those precise scientific criteria to classify species threats like endangered or vulnerable.
IUCN, Red List, Threatened Species categories. Great factual recap. Now let's think about the conceptual application. The mains of insights, maybe. What are the bigger governance themes emerging here? Let's start with this idea of institutional autonomy and why it's so critical.
Right. When you look at governance structures, the source material really highlights the vital role played by bodies like the WCCB in enforcement or the NGRBA and its successor in planning and coordination for something as massive as cleaning the Ganga.
Yeah.
Now, the effectiveness of these bodies, whether they actually achieve their mandates, hinges almost entirely on their institutional autonomy.
Meaning their ability to act independently.
Exactly. Their ability to operate free from undue political or economic pressure. This is especially crucial when they need to enforce laws against powerful interests, think large corporations involved in industrial pollution, or well-connected networks involved in illegal wildlife trade.
And if they lack that autonomy.
Well, that's when you risk what political scientists call regulatory capture, where the regulatory body, instead of serving the public interest, starts serving the interests of the very entities it's supposed to be regulating. So autonomy is absolutely fundamental for effective environmental governance.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, second insight. Let's revisit the CZA and the dolphins. What does that tell us about the power of these expert bodies?
It tells us something profound, I think. The CZA's specific ruling to prohibit dolphinariums based on classifying cetaceans as non-human persons. It demonstrates that these expert institutional rulings aren't just about ticking boxes or setting technical standards.
No, it was much more than that.
Right. They can be genuinely transformative. This decision fundamentally shifted the legal and ethical debate in India. It moved the perspective away from seeing these intelligent animals purely as property or entertainment resources towards acknowledging they might have inherent rights based on scientific evidence of their sentience and intelligence.
So it set a new ethical benchmark.
Precisely. It reinforces the critical importance of having expert bodies that can lead the way in shaping public morality and policy regarding animal welfare, potentially setting new national and even international precedents based on evolving scientific understanding and ethical considerations.
A really powerful example of institutional influence on ethics.
Oh.
Okay, and finally, what about the need for public participation? How does that link into these structures?
Well, effective governance, especially in a country as vast and diverse as India, simply cannot happen in a top-down vacuum. It has to link the institutions directly with the people on the ground, particularly with local knowledge and local concerns.
How do we see that reflected?
We see it clearly in the structure of the National Biodiversity Authority. Its entire mandate around equitable benefit sharing is built on recognizing the value of local communities and their traditional knowledge. The system is designed to ensure they are partners and beneficiaries, not just subjects of regulation.
Right, the NBA is built around that link.
And even in other areas, like large development projects that require environmental clearance, the process itself mandates public involvement. The requirement for a public hearing as part of the Environmental Impact Assessment, EIA process, explicitly shows that environmental decisions, legally, must involve informing and consulting the public. This aims to ensure outcomes are more democratic, more locally relevant, and hopefully more sustainable because local concerns are factored in. Effective governance needs that public linkage.
Absolutely. Okay, we have thoroughly charted the landscape of institutional power and mandates. We saw, for instance, how the WCCB is laser-focused on combating organized wildlife crime, primarily through enforcement and disrupting the supply. Now, here's a final thought to leave our listeners with, something to mull over. If the demand side of this equation remains strong, if the global demand for endangered species products, say, for the horn of the highly vulnerable greater one-horned rhino, continues unabated in consumer countries, does focusing most of our resources and mandates primarily on enforcement and supply disruption alone provide a truly sustainable long-term solution?
A challenging question.
Or must these governance structures, perhaps bodies like UNEP coordinating internationally, maybe working with NGOs like WWF, fundamentally shift more focus, more resources towards tackling and eliminating the demand in those key consumer countries.
Mhm.
Is that where the next big strategic shift needs to happen to truly secure these species long term? What stands out to you as the critical next step or challenge for this complex web of governance?
That's a critical question indeed, and it highlights that understanding the mandate is just the first step. Evaluating effectiveness and future strategy is the next. Remember, grasping the specific role and legal basis of each organization is essential for understanding how policy is implemented or isn't and what its real impact is on the ground.
We really hope this extensive deep dive into the organizational framework of environmental governance has given you that conceptual clarity, that detailed knowledge you were looking for.
Keep digging into these structures.
Until next time, stay curious and keep digging deep.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Telegram and Instagram. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.